Okay, I keep getting asked. My phone's going crazy. Ignore my piles. I am unarchiving files. So I am going to give you just a very brief overview, starting with who are you? Why are you even answering a question about the Maine Senate race? Well, I've run for Congress twice in Maine. I ran in the 2nd Congressional District. The people who voted for me ended up determining the outcome of both of those races. So let me tell you what is wrong with the Maine Senate race at this point in time. Whether Graham drops out or not, doesn't matter. Problem with the Maine Senate race. So I'm going to take off I'm an attorney that writes custom law for a living and happen to be very qualified. I have 4 degrees, 2 of them are graduate. I was a city official for 8 years. I've served on numerous boards and commissions. I, spend my day writing custom law for people. Let's take off that hat. Let's put on a kind of professor hat here. So here's my Tiffany Bond, MBA hat going. So we'll get, got to have the scholarly cardigan, put my glasses on for you. When I was getting my MBA, one of my professors said that when you graduate, you will be one of the intellectual elite, and it will be your personal responsibility to help people figure out how to have a better society, paraphrasing. But it's a responsibility. It's placed upon you. It's also a whole lot of student loans. So here's the problem with the Maine Senate race. There's a lot of people who don't love Susan Collins, but they don't necessarily love the other option, and not Susan Collins is not going to win an election. Graham has been saying a lot of things that people like. I like some of those things too. I said some of those things when I was running for office. I said, we need to make wise and judicious decisions with our shared purchasing dollars. We need to look at return on investment programs like SNAP and TANF and housing assistance. They actually save money overall. Plus, they're just nicer. They're better for everybody. We can talk about war. War is pretty awful and useless, and we're literally setting money on fire that we could do other stuff with. That student loans are predatory for a variety of reasons that I'm not going to go into today. I ran for Congress. If you get real bored, you can check out the rest of my YouTubes. There's plenty of them. You can see me debating the men. You can see me telling everybody that that's not why we're getting nothing done. You can see me interrupting a debate to ask why. And all the God green's earth, they decided to not ask a woman on the stage about abortion when they asked the dudes, but another time, another place, if you get bored, there's lots for you. So here's the overall structural problem. And here's what I know and why I can always tell you if somebody's not going to win a race. And I've been pretty accurate. So there are Republicans, most of whom are going to vote for Susan Collins. There'll be a few defectors. And here's what you need to know about Susan Collins if you're from away. She is a really, really bad legislator, but she is an extremely effective politician. And that's where people get caught up. So she's very good at selling her dog and pony. She's very good at being folksy. She's very good at looking like the victim. So we all defend her because, Susan Collins shouldn't do those things, but you shouldn't beat up Susan for whatever those problems are. She's very effective. And people regularly, constantly, chronically underestimate her skills as a politician. Legislator, crap. She can't legislate to save her life. She's one of the worst legislators I've ever seen. I've never seen anything good come out of her office. She is the queen of causes without controversy. That's Susan Collins. So I ran for Congress in 2018. And then in 2020, I was contemplating running against Susan Collins, but my attempt at a run got squashed by the pandemic. I literally couldn't get the signatures because of the restrictions that were on. Tried a lawsuit when it was a lot. Doesn't matter for the purposes of what we're talking about today. But about a year and a half before that, Sarah Gideon was floated. And I'm like, Sarah's not going to win. And people were like, oh, you can't know that. All the way through the race. Sarah's not going to win. Oh, no. You can't possibly know that. You're a negative Nancy. Sarah will not win. But she's qualified. She's a woman. She's polling well. She's not going to win. Here is the reason why. Although in her case, it had nothing to do with where she was from. She was show up in like white capri pants and an $80,000 car and farms, but very detached from reality, very detached from things. Her folksy didn't come across as authentic. But again, none of that really mattered. The structural problem is Republicans are generally going to vote for Susan. They'll hold their nose, they'll do it. Democrats are going to vote for a Democrat unless a Democrat isn't available, and then they'll vote for anybody else. But Democrats will never have there be a Democrat not available. That's the structural problem. They started figuring this out in places kind of like Alaska, which has a similar demographic. It's actually the only state I've never been to, but my husband used to work there. And culturally, it's probably one of the closest to Maine because we're difficult to understand and explain if you don't live here. So you've got, you know, R&D, and I'm not going to write in these because I think this mirrors. So you've got R&D and the twixt shan't meet. These are voting for Susan. These are voting for whoever's not Susan. So then, and that's Republicans and Democrats. And then you've got independents. And most years, there are more independents in Maine, and we vote, than there are either Democrats or Republicans. And this is a statewide race. So I know the 2nd Congressional District really well, but I also lived in the 1st Congressional District for a long time. I just worked more in the 2nd Congressional District. I now live in the 2nd Congressional District. Where I'm looking at right now is about 20 miles as the crow flies, or as Maria von Trapp runs over the mountains as if she is going to avoid Nazis if it gets real bad here. Anyway, so the independents decide elections in Maine 100% of the time. I'm going to close this door because my 15-year-old has just decided to do a chore, which is awesome, but he doesn't need to be a part of this YouTube. So the independents decide all of the races, and but the independents, we aren't one monolithic voting block. So what ties independents together is very, very, very different than what ties Republicans or Democrats together. We don't have a party platform. We're unenrolled. We're actually not in any party. So what ties us together is we look for things like the, hang on, I'm getting a message. Hopefully you might write, I might address why Andrea LaFlame's Senate writing campaign doesn't seem to be catching on. I can address that, but I'll do it in, actually, let me do it right now. Andrea LaFlame, I know Andrea indirectly. We've talked on the phone a few times. She's a lovely gal. But she is not a write-in candidate right now because she was a write-in for the primary. And so there was so much money with Graham, and she wasn't on ballot. And that's the problem people have with me. So there's a lot of people who are messaging me today, which is why I'm here on YouTube. Oh my gosh, you know, you could be the candidate. You've always said you could take Susan Collins head to head. Probably can take Susan Collins head to head. I just don't have that structural possibility right now. So she could not make it through the primary because she was not on the ballot. And it is incredibly difficult to get through a primary if you are write-in candidate, A, you have very little name recognition, B, and she worked hard, but you know, she just didn't have it. Close up my pen for a minute so it doesn't dry out. And C, there is both a current governor and a very moneyed candidate who has gotten a lot of popularity behind him as he burst onto the scene like the Kool-Aid man. So structurally, she was never going to take that primary. No matter how much came out on Graham, she just didn't have the money or the resources to do it. She was iced out of a lot of things. Maine used to have a very robust system where we would have forums that were put on by a lot of not-for-profits and communities, and it was amazing. We had this great, very active community that did that, and it was terrific. I loved it. In 2018, oh my gosh, that was one of the things that made my heart swell. I loved it. But those went away. And a lot of people are like, yeah, a lot of that went away at the pandemic. Didn't go away because of the pandemic. Went away because people like Jared Golden stopped participating in those. And then when the moneyed favored candidate dropped out, they didn't bother to have the forum because nobody would come. And that has been the problem in Maine elections since at least 2018, is you will have a interesting race going with local candidates that are starting to jump in, and money kind of doesn't mean as much in Maine until you get so much of it that it's everywhere. And because of that, and because Maine is an inexpensive media market, it is really easy for people to drop in a candidate. Graham, he burst into the scene like Kool-Aid man. He was dropped in. So was Sarah Gideon. So was So was Jared Golden. Jared Golden dropped into a primary that had a whole bunch of people running. There were some really good candidates in that race. In particular, Craig Olson, he was fantastic. He would have been a great congressman. I was in that race, but I wasn't a Democrat. So, they didn't really drop in anything against me. So Graham was dropped in with a lot of money and not well vetted and not well focused groups. Sort of the same thing happened with Sarah, although Sarah was at least comparatively exponentially more qualified than Graham. Don't put Sarah in this race. She'll lose this race. Don't do it. Don't do it. So the problem that we have structurally in the race, and I hope that kind of addressed why Andrea isn't going anywhere, and she definitely isn't going anywhere in the final, because she lost the primary. So she's out. I don't know if she can put another write-in because she would have to be an independent, I think. And I don't think she would be able to get out of the party sufficiently. I think she's out. I think she's done. I don't think she can get back in. The only way she'd get back in is if the Democrats dropped her in. And I really struggle to think that the Democrats would put her in after the conflict they had with her trying to assert that she should be included, and the Democrats definitely not liking that. When I talk about the Democrats, I'm talking about the party generally. I am not a fan of political parties. I had some really bad experiences with both. I've never been a Democrat. I was a Republican when growing up and into my teens, kind of drifting off into my 20s. I've been an independent for decades. So let's go back to the game theory because this is getting long and you don't want to hear me babble. I am not that interesting. I am no one of consequence. So here's a structural problem. Democrats, Republicans, independents are tied together, and they're tied together in a way that doesn't make sense to Democrats or Republicans. We are tied together most often by character, by trustworthiness. So independents usually can handle a wider swath of political views if we trust you, if we think you're sincere, if we think you're honest, if we think that your heart's in the right place. I had an awful lot of Republicans and Democrats come up to me when I was running for office and say, I don't agree with you on everything. And of course they don't. I wouldn't even want to be married to somebody who agreed with me on everything. That would be just awful. I mean, we're never all going to agree on everything. Don't agree with you on everything, but you seem very common sense focused. You seem to have your heart in the right place, and you really seem to want to do the job. And I did. I didn't like the job interview, but the job itself, it was one I was willing to do, and I think needs to be done well. So why did Graham get some traction with independents, and why is he ultimately going to lose even if he stays in the race? So he got some traction because oh man, this is hard. As a woman, he makes every hair on the back of my neck stand up. I work in domestic violence. I'm a family law attorney. He was never going to get my vote. I tried to be open to the possibility of him, but from about 5 minutes after, it was clear that he had some really big character flaws. And those character flaws actually would probably draw some Republicans, but would dump out a bunch of Democrats, and it would definitely turn off a lot of independents. Some of the things he said, very popular, and a candidate who can win against Susan will say those. They'll say things like, maybe not healthcare is a right, but the system is absolutely broken, and we need a system that works for everybody. I got a lot of grief when I ran because I said that, hang on just a sec. Sorry, my 15-year-old's asking questions, and I love that he's doing a chore right now at the least convenient time. So I got a lot of grief because I said that Medicare for All was not enough. It doesn't have the risk modeling in the right place. It doesn't have the risk assessment in the right place. It has a risk assessed to clinics and providers, which in rural areas means you're not going to have any, no matter how you change the reimbursement structure, not going to work. So we're probably going to need, for example, government-run clinics in our rural areas, or we're just not going to have services provided in those. So that's going to be a popular sentiment. Talking about spending less money on wars. I don't think most of us like to see our money just blown up. I mean, we all saw how well the 4th of July didn't go. Nobody really likes to watch money that could be spent on services and taking care of our communities get literally just set on fire. So there's a lot of those things that are popular and populist, but also just good policy. A housing first model, for example, is good public policy. Some forms of UBI that are tested are very effective. good public policy, good return on investment, costs us less than being less humane. So we should be using a measuring stick for things like, is it good public policy because it benefits most people? And is it good public policy because it's a humane and conscientious choice a society should make? So a lot of those policies, if you were to get a winning candidate, would be something that are advocated by those candidates. I advocated for an awful lot of policies before Graham was doing that. I'm glad that he was interested in a lot of the same things I was. That made him more appealing as a candidate. He just had some character flaws that made him not trustworthy to me. Other things that are going to be really important. I was saying fascist before fascist was cool. We do have a fascist problem in this country. We do have a problem where we become so team sport oriented, we can't break through and see what is actually constitutional. There's real problems with that. So what wins and what doesn't win? Well, again, we've got this Democrat and this Republican. So what you need is somebody who can get a lot of the independents, and then they either need to peel off some of the Democrats or some of the Republicans from the other side and get most of it. You're not going to get the Republicans. Susan's getting those. So you need somebody who can get most of the independents or enough of the independents and almost all the Democrats. The Democrats, if you only had an independent in the race, they're going to vote for the independent. They're not going to vote for Susan. The independent would have to be just truly appalling. So you're going to get that. What you need is the slice in the middle. And the slice in the middle, it's not holding it. So the slice in the middle, and it's not necessarily middle. You might pick up people who are really far to the right and really far to the left. A lot of those policies are similar, but they use different language. So, for example, if you talk to a Republican about freedom of movement, they will appreciate that statement most of the time. Freedom of movement is a basic human right. It's a libertarian concept. And most Republicans are going to be on board with that if you use that language. If you talk to a Democrat about hey, we should have a clear, thorough immigration process that's not punitive or harsh, that respects people who come here that want to work. You're going to get a lot of buy-in from that. Maybe not the same from Republicans. You need to be able to talk in both languages. And if you can't translate between those two, you're going to have a hard time. If you cannot frame the fact that pure socialism doesn't really work well because people are not equally well motivated, absent some very direct benefits that capitalism provides. If you can't pull yourself out of that and say, look, socialism as a concept definitely has a place in the political discourse and it should be there. But what we really need is a lot of those concepts of social good sprinkled on capitalism, because capitalism doesn't have a soul. So you're going to pick up people left, right, and center with arguments like that because they're a good argument and they're true. You want people that are saying things that are true. The problem you're going to have is the Democrats are never, ever, Taylor Swift number of evers, going to put up an independent. They're not doing it. They're going to put up a Democrat. And they don't have a Democrat right now that can win that race, which is the problem. I really like Bellows as a human being. I think that she goes out of her way to be a good human being. She has been kind and honest and forthright with me and conscientious with me when it was not necessarily to her political benefit to do so. Love that about her. She's run in this race before. I'm sure she hasn't ruled it out. I think she'd have a hard time winning, even though I really like her as a person. Troy Jackson, I saw him getting floated. He already has Republicans gunning after him in ways that I think are going to hurt. But also, I think he's missing. He's a working guy, but he's missing some spark. He doesn't have the right fire in him. Any of the other candidates I've seen floated, I can think of people who would be great at the job, but maybe are a little on the older side of the spectrum. Oh my gosh, in 2020, if Lee Softly had run, she would have absolutely slam dunked that race. But that's not where she wants to be. Lee Softly, if you don't know, former law court chief justice, current dean of the law school. So amply qualified, funny, charming, engaging. Everybody loves Lee. So there are people who could run, but they're probably not going to be put forward by the Democrats. No way that Democrats will leave that open. And you need people who can get the slice, who can merge those pieces. That's a piece I'm good at, but I can't get the people underneath because no one will ever put me up as a Democrat. No one will put me up as a Republican. There is the problem. So who can win this race against Susan? I don't know. I, made kind of a joking post because when all this Graham nonsense came out, holy cow, my phone just went just bonkers. I try not to swear in recorded media. I might have a lot of stepped on Lego language as somebody who works in family law, who is married to a boat captain. I certainly have a lot of choice words all the time, but I try to be conscientious of when I'm putting them in writing or in recordings because not everybody wants to read that for posterity. I don't know who could win this race. I don't. I mean, I've said I could win it, but structurally, I can't get there. I'd have to be the only candidate with all the resources that somebody like Plattner or Gideon had. Could I win it with that? Sure, but that's never going to happen. I don't have those resources. If somebody would like to magically put me on the ballot, which would be impossible to do unless I went in as a Democrat, and I don't think the state laws would preclude me from doing that. I don't really want to be a part of the Democratic Party. Maybe if it were to fix the problem, but there's got to be somebody who would love to be a Democrat, who would love that role, that may be electable. I just don't know who they are, and I don't know how they're going to get traction in time. But you need somebody who can pull all of the Democrats, or almost all the Democrats. And that's not hard. That's just a not Susan. The problem is getting the independents, and I don't know anybody who's going to get that. I don't know. Definitely it could be Graham, because for every vote or 10 that Graham picks up, he loses 20. So I appreciate that he has lots of money. I appreciate that he's been passionate about this. I feel real bad that his wife has had to be his emotional support person, because I don't know that she signed up for that role. And maybe she did. I don't know her. I mean, 12 people live in Maine, but I don't know that particular pair. So if you see people all over the internet, and there will be lots of them all over the internet telling you everything you never needed to know about Maine politics, most of it wrong. The problem is you've got everybody that is very, very, very sure of their rightness. And the centrist Dems will tell you it has to be a centrist to carry the independents. That's not true. The more progressive Dems and the socialist kind of wing will tell you it needs to be one of them to energize them. Also not true. In fact, I think both those candidates probably lose. You need someone who can speak both languages. And I always describe myself as a moderate, not because I'm a centrist. That's not the same thing. I think of a moderate as you take the proper amount of work that needs to be done, and you apply to it the budget and the time constraints and add like 10%. And that's the moderate solution. And that means right now, because Congress has basically abdicated their role for decades, but certainly in the last 10 years, a moderate position is actually pretty extreme on things like climate change, on things like the economy, on things like human rights, because right now a moderate stance is our government is violating a phenomenal amount of human rights and our Constitution, regardless of what the Supreme Court, which clearly has a bias right now and makes me feel like I should get a refund on my my law school student loans. Maybe not my master's degree in business loans. Maybe I should pay more for those, because the Supreme Court certainly understands how profit works. You need somebody who doesn't aim left or right, but aims due north. And I heard Graham using some of that language. That was, again, language that I used when I ran in 2018 and when I ran again in 22. My compass doesn't point left or right. My compass points north. And that's what independents are looking for. So as you're going through this, trying to figure out who to support, look for people who show a pure, accurate, clear, consistent, unquestionable interest in their community and supporting their community. That is hard to find. He's definitely not in the same political space that I would be in, but Mamdani has done that. He's very clearly supporting his community. I did that when I did Maine raising. If you don't know what that is, I told people, please don't give me money. I'm going to substitute all of the traditional campaign things with something better. So I told people to take the same amount of money they would give my campaign, and you guys borrow this, steal it, use it for whatever candidate you want. I don't own this, but it took a while to get it through the ethics commissions down in DC. take whatever amount of money you would give that candidate. And maybe instead of giving that to that candidate, or at least half of it to that candidate, go find a small business in Maine, spend some money and say, hey, I'm really supporting this person. Please go look them up. I wanted to infuse money in your community and support you. Please go look them up for me. Same thing with non-for-profits. Same thing with funding teachers on Donors Choose or just donating directly to schools. Use your money, help an actual organization, help a business, help a real person, and give them a message in the notes section that says, hey, I'm supporting this candidate, but I really wanted to make sure the dollars went to the community. I really wanted to make sure that everyone there was taken care of. Sorry, the sun's going down, so you're getting quite a bit of reflection. Use that in Maine, use that anywhere. That's a very helpful thing. I'm sure if I'd had the money and resources in 2018 or in 2022, and I was able to say, don't give this money to me, take that same several $million and go plow that money into the community, that's a winning message. We just didn't get anybody to do enough of it. Every time it was done, it was like magic. Every single time. Not every time. I have no idea how much it was done. And that was the whole point, is that it was completely not corruptible and it helped the community. But I could tell when people were doing it, because I would start getting emails and phone calls of people who were like, hey, you seem to really care about the community. I want to know who you are. I want to know more about your policies. So they don't have to do the Maine raising stuff that I did, but they need to show a clear interest in the community. It needs to be consistent. It needs to be substantial and significant. It needs to be something that is unquestionable, and it needs to be authentic. Authenticity is super important. They need to talk about things that will actually legitimately improve the lives of people living in Maine. And there's just simply not a lot of that. Let me close this blind a little bit. Maybe that'll help. So yeah, they need to actually care about the community that they're in. Just a minute. It looks like we're going into a goth setting here. Oh, there, that's better. Except now you can see my giant stack of recycle that I have to break down and get to the transfer station. So, make sure that you're picking somebody that's authentic, that cares about the community, that has reasonable policies that are both achievable, but also some lofty ones, that show that there's some goals beyond what's achievable now. And you need somebody who can talk multiple languages, and you need somebody who, on the very surface, with everything they say, comes across as ethical and authentic. That's how you pick up the independents. It's not by yelling, I'm a Democrat, or I'm a Republican, or, the other party's bad, or, oh my gosh, they're awful, or anything that tells people that you're negging them for not agreeing with you on everything. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to agree with people on everything. It doesn't mean that you're necessarily trying to take them to the party. What you're trying to say is this, that there's somebody that we can all agree on that cares, that's smart, that's compassionate, that's qualified, that's competent, and that's who you need to find. Who is that? I don't know. Structurally, it probably can never be me, because I am never going to be getting that D chunk. And Susan is always going to get that R chunk in this race, because she is, regardless of what everybody else says, an excellent politician. Very bad legislator, excellent politician. So that is me on my soapbox. If you have any questions, you can feel free to find me on social media. I'm on Blue Sky. I'm on Threads. You can email me. But all the people who are trying to figure out a candidate, they're looking at the wrong stuff. And that's a problem. So feel free to run candidates by me, and I'll tell you if they're going to win or lose. Most of them are going to lose. Most of them are going to lose to Susan. Susan is just very good at staying in office and always underestimated. And she's got the dirt on everybody. And I was very fortunate that when I ran for office, I just don't have any dirt. I'm super boring. I mean, I do need to paint my fence, but whatever. Good luck. Mute some Senate words for tonight, because otherwise you're going to have a really long weekend. Have a good one.